Everyone. My name is Leanne Clark-Shirley, and I am the American Society on Aging's president and CEO. I want,
Woohoo!
woo! First, it's my first official public appearance as such. Thank you for that celebration, Chip. Um, I want to welcome everyone to another episode of ASA Live. And as you can see, Chip Conley is here with us today. Chip is the founder of the Modern Elder Academy and a New York Times bestselling author. And he's got a brand new book coming out next week called Learning to Love Midlife. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and talk a little bit about Chip's mission. If you have questions or thoughts throughout this conversation, please feel free to use the chat, and we'll try to address them. Chip, how you doing? Welcome.
Thank you, Leanne. Congratulations once
Thank
again.
you.
No longer interim, and that's nice. Yeah, it's great to be here. And the subtitle of the book is 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. And I think that is maybe part of what we'll talk about today, because I think if you can actually create a great midlife, you have created the kind of aging process that is what Becca Levy talks about, which with her
Yeah.
research, where, if you can actually move from a negative to a positive with your mindset on aging, you get 7.5 years of additional life. And often it's in midlife where that mindset around aging has to shift.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into all of this with you. And, I've been really looking forward to this conversation. ASA members know this. So some people watching may know this, but I'm a gerontologist. I've been studying aging. I think I took my first class in 1999. And as I reflect on my career, I've been working in this field for 20 years now. And I was thinking today, probably every day for the past 2 decades, I've thought about aging. I've thought about older people, how our country supports older people, how our country fails older people, and
Mhm.
how I can work, whatever situation I'm in, how can we make things better? But it sort of occurred to me, ironically, that I don't stop to think about my own aging often enough,
Yeah.
even though, like you say, I know how important my childhood and this period of my life, I'll be 44, so I'm
hmm
squarely in middle age. I
hmm
know that what's going on now matters. So I just wanted to say, thanks from the start for
Yeah.
giving me and everyone listening really this opportunity to think about our own present and our own
Mm.
future, really, no matter how old we are. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I think that hopefully this session can be both personally and professionally fulfilling. So
Yeah.
this is not just about how do you take this information for your professional life, but also your personal life.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. And maybe let's start sort of from a personal take on your
Mm.
side. I've heard you described as a man on a mission to bring a pro aging message, which is,
Yeah.
we're in perfect alignment with ASA.
Yeah.
Um, I want to, what's behind this mission? What's your why? Why are you doing this?
For those who don't know my history, I for 24 years was the boutique hotel CEO, one of the first boutique hoteliers in the U.S., and created the second largest boutique hotel company in the U.S. And it was based in San Francisco. And then I had a really rough late 40s, and everything that could go wrong did go wrong. I had a flatline experience, an NDE as well. And I decided, like, okay, this isn't working. And I was having, I guess, what we would call a midlife crisis.
Hmm.
I would now call it a midlife chrysalis, because the caterpillar to butterfly journey, the midlife is the chrysalis. And it was a dark, gooey time, but it's also where my transformation happened.
Hmm.
And then in my 50s, everything got really good. Everything that went, on all levels of my life, and including the fact that a couple of years after I'd sold my company at the bottom of the Great Recession, I was asked by the young founders of Airbnb to join them when they were a little tech startup 11 years ago.
And
And
you
they
mean young? You mean chronologically young?
Oh, they were very young. Yeah, they were, the average age in the company was 26 and I was 52. So they called me the modern elder. At first I was like, "Oh, I don't know about that. You're making fun of my age." And then they said, "No, Chip, a modern elder is someone who's as curious as they are wise." It's like, "Oh, I like that." And so I spent 4 years full-time there and 3.5 years part-time, which really, and I sort of saw, like, wow, I've had the tale of two midlives. My late 40s were awful, and of course the U curve of happiness research shows that, in fact, 45 to 50 is the lowest point for people on average. And then my 50s were great. And I was like, okay, I'm curious about this. I ended up writing a book called Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder, based upon my Airbnb experience. But I also started processing this idea of like, what is midlife? And one day when I was down in Baja in Mexico, where I was writing the book at a beachfront home, I had an epiphany, a Baja aha. And that was, why is it that we don't have midlife wisdom schools? Why don't we have a place for people in the middle of their lives to actually reflect and reimagine and maybe repurpose themselves personally or professionally? And that's how MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, came about. And with our primary customers, people in midlife, the average age is 54. We've had people over 4,000 people join us in Baja from 47 countries. So it's a very global phenomena and movement we're talking about. And that's sort of how it all happened. And now we have a campus opening in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I wrote Learning to Love Midlife partly because I had, spent the last 6 years immersed with people in midlife and trying to understand what they were going through, as well as the social science on midlife, which really I didn't think had been given a lot of mainstream attention.
I agree with you. I don't think it's been given attention even in the academic worlds of gerontology either. I think in our culture and in our policies, our public policies, we think about aging, we automatically go to the 65 plus.
Yes.
And, I'm probably not the first person to be surprised that, you actually anchored your mission to midlife and attached the word elder to it, the modern elder, but you're not 65 yet. I mean, how's that all working?
It's a little confusing, I will tell you. I mean, I will say that when people hear elder, they think elderly, and they think of someone other than themselves. And then some people hear elder and they think, oh, that's the church, like a church elder. Or it's just men who are elders, or or it's the gerontocracy. I mean, there's a lot
loaded words.
Elder, all aging words. Aging's a loaded word. Elder's a loaded word. Midlife is a loaded word. So I sort of like kept choosing all the wrong words. Or actually trying to popularize, reclaim words. I mean, the word, the word Yankee back in a long time ago was a terrible thing, and black was a terrible thing, and queer was a terrible thing, and redneck was a terrible thing. And then, the people who are being called those things reclaimed those words. And I would just say maybe it's time for us to reclaim elder, but to give it a modern spin. I think a modern elder is, again, someone who's as curious as they are wise, but they're also not about reverence. They're about relevance. How do you stay relevant? And that requires you to be a constant learner, and what I call long life learning, not just lifelong learning. And so, yes, I think you can be an elder at any age, because it's a relative term. Tom Brady, as a quarterback in the NFL in his early 40s, was an elder. Sure. And if you're a software engineer in Silicon Valley at 35, you're maybe an elder. And so elder is a function of, maybe having more life experience than the people around you, but that can happen at any age.
I love that. One of the things I find myself in conversation about is the limitations of chronological age. Just because one day we go to bed and we're 64, we wake up and we're 65, there's nothing magic that happened, but all of a sudden the world treats us different. Our public policies treat us different. People view us as different, and we might start to view ourselves differently too. So I love what you're saying. It's not about age, it's about life experience.
Well, and I have a term I want to sort of like introduce, and it's in my book, which I'll even show you there you go.
Oh, look at that.
You can sort of see it. It's a hologram. It's a hologram. Learning to Love Midlife. Age fluid. So we're familiar in modern society now with something called gender fluid. And I believe age fluid, if I were to give it a definition, is someone who doesn't define themselves based upon their chronological age or generation. And they see themselves as all of the ages they've ever been, as well as will be. And that fluidity allows them to be liberated from the expectations of themselves and others of them. And that's, I think, what we all could use, is a little bit of liberation from the stereotypes, whether those stereotypes are against millennials or Gen Z by older people, or vice versa, okay boomer. And I'm a boomer, and I understood why okay boomer came about, but like I don't think it applies to me, because not because I'm not a boomer. Yes, age wise I am, but in terms of the mentality that brought up okay boomer, which is like, stop telling me how the world works, Mr. Conley,
Yeah.
born in 1960. I don't, that doesn't fit me. And so, yeah, so I think age fluidity is a thing.
Age fluidity. Yeah. Yeah. Curious to hear if other folks think that's a thing too. I like the sentiment of it though, drawing upon your past, your present, and your future.
Well, also, I think we're moving into an era with all of the biohacking going on and all of the science, the life
Hmm.
sciences, improvements. It's like they can actually now tell you what your biological age, which is
Biological,
different
right?
than chronological, or
Hmm.
you could have a cognitive age.
Hmm.
You could have an age for your liver that's different than for your kidney.
Yeah.
You can have a psychological age, and
Yeah.
so. Who knows when we show up at the DMV and we have to talk about what our age, we are like, oh, which age do you want?
Right.
So there's a
Yeah.
lot of ages there, and that in the past it was purely the chronological.
Yep. Yep. And to your point, there are stereotypes attached to those that can do some real harm. And something I kind of wanted to ask you along those lines, certainly in the field of aging, again, thinking back to public policy, but even in public discourse, we tend to talk about aging through sort of narrow lenses. We talk about our health and we talk about our pocketbooks.
Mm,
Um, and usually when we're talking about health, we're talking about declines in some way. And that leaves so much out of the human experience. And really, I feel like the Modern Elder Academy and what you stand for is sort of antithetical to all that.
yeah.
In the new book, Learning to Love Midlife, you reach well beyond, you touch on physical and
Hmm.
vocational,
Hmm.
um, but you go well beyond that. So I wanted to,
Yeah.
one of your sections is, for instance, there must be more to life than this. So yeah, what else is there?
Yeah. Well, I think, unfortunately, let me start by saying aging and growing are the same thing.
Hmm.
But somehow when you ask a 15-year-old, how you've grown, Johnny, um, you don't say that the same thing to a 55-year-old because they think you're talking about their waistline. So the reality is we're
Yeah.
aging, but we're also growing. And I don't mean just waistline. I mean, we're growing emotionally, socially and relationally, culturally, intellectually, spiritually. So the only playing field that most people sort of think about when it comes to aging is the physical playing field, and maybe the vocational one, but the physical one is, the anti-aging industry is based upon physical,
Which is huge.
and
Yeah.
it's anti-women generally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so long story short is, I think there are a lot of playing fields to be playing on. And so
Hmm.
the book, Learning to Love Midlife, really speaks to, okay, what gets better with age in each of these different domains. So emotionally, our emotional intelligence, our EQ grows with age, as does our emotional moderation. Our desire for relationships, our desire for being connected to
Hmm.
others, actually grows with age. And so that's another thing to consider.
Yeah.
Um, uh, you know, it, Wisdom grows with age. From a cognitive perspective, crystallized intelligence, the ability to think synthetically and to solve problems holistically, gets better with age. Our spiritual curiosity grows with age. Um, so there's a lot there, and I just wanted to make sure that we didn't just look at aging as being the negative thing because our body doesn't look like it did 20 years ago.
Right.
That's why try to have a pro-aging message. And I was lucky enough last year to be asked to come to the TED conference to give a talk on that. And people definitely love the idea of pro-aging. So I'm going to
Sure.
keep talking about it.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's happening to all of us. Why? And centering it in something to fear, something to cure, something to avoid, that just causes all kinds of problems economically and physically and socially. So I love it. I'm curious.
I'm gonna do one quick
Yeah.
thing because my laptop's telling me I have low battery. So one
Oh,
second, one second,
okay.
one second.
Live internet, folks. This is what it's like.
I am back. I have a little booster here that I will do, and we'll be fine. Okay. So, next question.
Yeah. Next questions. Well, thinking about the reactions that you've heard from folks and thinking about writing, the process of writing the book, was there one domain of midlife that was sort of your favorite to write about, or the most surprising for you to write about?
Oops, am I back?
You're
Oh,
back.
I'm back. Okay. I just can't hear you though. Okay.
Oh,
But you can hear me okay. I can hear
I
you.
can hear you.
Okay,
Yep.
got it. Um, so I think the one that is most interesting is the emotional and the social relational.
Mm,
When we talk about wellness, we're very fixated on the personal side of wellness. Uh, what are you eating? How are you exercising? How are you sleeping? And yet, when you look at Harvard's longitudinal study for 85 years, you look at Blue Zone's work, you look at Phil Pizzo's work at Stanford Medical School, what you see is that the number one variable for people who are living longer, healthier, happier lives is not personal wellness, it's social wellness. It's the idea of how committed are we to oh, there we go. That's better for me. How committed, that's hopefully better on your end too. How committed are we to investing in social relationships? And the fact that across pretty much all domains, this is the number one variable for living a longer, happier, healthier life, means that we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing? And we
mhm.
tend to look at this on the loneliness side,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is perfectly fine because that is the natural result of what happens if you don't invest. Just like obesity is the natural result of not investing in people's diets and exercise. But how are we investing in that, and how are we helping people to learn that friendship is a practice and it's something you actually have to develop? And often what happens, why it's interesting in midlife, as Bob Waldinger at Harvard has shown, he said, the number one variable for someone in their 80s who are happier and healthier is how invested were they in their relationships in their 50s.
Mhm.
And so, but what happens in 20s, 30s, and 40s is because we're so busy, the spinning
Mhm.
plates phenomena. You're 44 years old, Leanne, and you're like, you got a lot of spinning plates now, especially elevating to the new role. And the bottom line is, some of our friendships and relationships atrophy as a result, and
Yeah.
therefore we actually need to, in midlife, make a commitment that we're going to actually go back and start investing in these relationships. And so that's really what I'm focused on.
Yeah.
And MEA develops programs that help with that.
Mhm. Yeah. I want to come back to that, but we have a question.
Yes,
How has
yes.
social media changed the equation about midlife?
Oh
Has
my God.
it?
Well, social media has certainly changed the equation on so many things, but I think so. I don't think it's specific to midlife. I do think it's very specific to social relations, and I think the research on this is varied. In
Mhm.
some ways, social media has helped us to have a wider net of who can be in our world, but it has at the same time meant the depth of our relationships isn't as strong as it used to be. And that's really when it comes to loneliness,
Mhm.
um, and again, this is seen both at people at any age. You can
Mhm.
have lots of friends, and
Sure.
lots of followers, but if you don't have the depth of connection with them, then you actually can feel quite lonely.
Yeah.
And so I think social media has been a problem in that regard, and it's part of the reason why at MEA we do in-person workshops. We also have
Mhm.
online programs, and the online programs make us more accessible globally, make us more accessible to people who can't afford the time or money to come to a workshop.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is collective effervescence,
Yeah.
our sense of feeling connected and a communal joy is much more likely in person when our
In person.
mirror neurons can dance together.
Yeah, I love that. I'm actually doing a little bit of writing right now about, y- sort of playing on the observation when I look at so many mission statements and vision statements in the field of aging. This is not a dig on anyone, but the word independence
Mm.
pops up so much. And, when you think about what we're talking about, the how
Interdependence.
yes, it's interdependence. It's
Yeah.
interdependence. And one of the things I've been writing about just yesterday was being at a concert. And I feel most at home at a concert surrounded by a couple thousand people. Everyone's singing the same words, moving with the same rhythm.
Yeah,
even though they
that's
were not talking to that, you know, that's
that is collective effervescence. So
collective effervescence.
Emile Durkheim,
Yeah.
he actually talked about it 110 years ago, wrote about it as a French cultural anthropologist or sociologist. And then Dacher Keltner, who's on our faculty at MEA, who's UC Berkeley professor and started the Greater Good Science Center. He studied the 8 most common ways that people feel awe in the world. And number 1 and 2 on the list were a surprise. They were not nature. Nature was number 3.
Yeah.
Number 2 on the list was collective effervescence, when you feel a sense of connection to other people, whether it's on a dance floor or at a gospel choir on the Sunday or whatever it is.
ASA conference.
ASA conference. There you go. And then number 1 on the list was moral beauty, the sense that I am able to witness courage and kindness and compassion and equanimity in others is, the most common way people feel awe.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. I think there's a lot to that, leaning into interdependence. And, I was curious about the connections you see between investing in a well-loved midlife for ourselves. What connections you see between doing that and then, building a better society for everyone as we age. And I imagine it has something to do with what we're talking about.
Well, midlife is the bridge that takes you to older age. Just like adolescence is the bridge that takes you from childhood to adulthood, or emerging adulthood, as it's now called. And so if midlife's a really important part of how you live your older age for a variety of reasons. Your perspective on aging, the habits you form in midlife will influence how your older age is. So yeah, I think to suggest that midlife doesn't have a connection to, say, aging, it's a huge mistake.
Yeah. It's so true. And I think it's worth thinking about. I know I've been thinking lately about the habits I have developed and the new habits I'm developing in this new year, and really kind of looking at them and saying, are these going to set me up for a happy tomorrow and a happy 80 years old? And some of them probably not. One of my favorite sections in your book is titled, I have no more F's to give. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And that's just, really resonating with me right now, prioritizing what you care about, what you put your attention towards. And I'm looking at that deeply right now myself.
Yeah, that was a hard chapter to write because my mom, who's 86, was going to say, like, oh, Chip, you shouldn't use the word F, the F word. But what I really wanted to do is to help people to see that, one of the upsides of aging is getting clear on what's important to you and who's important to you. And for many people, they have spent way too much time caring about things and people who they shouldn't care about. I mean, not to say that you don't care about them, but you shouldn't, worry so much about what people say about you. And so if you're going to give a, F about something, that means there may be other things you're not going to give an F about. And that's really the point of that chapter, is to, how do you help people discern, which is a beautiful word that I think comes with aging, around what you care about and you give an F about, and then what don't you give an F about, and how do you do that in a graceful way, but in a way that actually creates the editing function that liberates you from, frankly, for so many people in midlife, from caring what everybody else thinks about you.
Yeah. It's a tough one. It's not easy. Well, I'm mindful of time. I want to switch to something a little bit off topic that doesn't directly relate to your book. When I was looking at your website, chipconley.com,
Yes,
there's a menu bar at the top called Chip GPT. Very clever.
Yes.
I played around with it. So for the folks watching, why don't you tell us what Chip GPT is? And then I'm dying to know what it's like to see your own thoughts transmitted back to you in AI.
Yeah. So basically, a few months ago, when people knew that I was going to have this book tour going on, and I'm lucky enough to be on Good Morning America next Monday and on the Today Show next Wednesday, they said, like, everybody's going to want to, like, tap into your brain. And the book is meant for that. But they said to me, like, we can figure out a way to take your content, because I have a daily blog called Wisdom Well, and take your content from your blog, take 3 or 4 of your books, and put all that in a data set, and then let people ask questions based upon that data set. And that's how Chip, not Chat, GBT came about. Thankfully, I have a 4-letter C word as a name. And I will say that, I mean, of course it's not going to be as good as like what I would say directly, but it's pretty good. And I sort of scared for the future in terms of like, do I have any relevance, or just,
Right.
just my historical writing will take care of it. I guess, in some ways, if I wanted to ask George Washington or Ben Franklin or something like that, it'd be interesting to be able to have a Ben GPT and ask Ben Franklin questions. And
Yeah.
so I'm overall a bit neutral when it comes to AI. I see some of the upside. I also see some of the downside.
Sure.
I do think that one beautiful thing about the era we're going into is when knowledge becomes that commoditized, so that AI is, ruling the world, wisdom becomes more valuable because it's more scarce. And so I just want to say that I do believe we're moving into an era where 60 years ago, 5 years ago, Peter Drucker talked about the knowledge workers, and I'm now talking about the wisdom workers. And because I think wisdom will become an increasingly valuable quality in organizations.
Yeah. Sort of in context of authenticity. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Chip GPT, there you have it.
Yeah.
So,
And you can that's a very long URL though.
yeah.
You'll just find it on the chipconley.com website.
Yeah. Yes. I played with it a little bit. Do you see what inquiries people type into that?
So the team that's doing this does, but
Fascinating.
is Chip available for a date keeps coming up, but I don't know. No. Oh my God.
Well, speaking of being available for dates, you are going to join us in San Francisco at the On Aging Conference this March, the Thursday of the conference, which is March. I should have this at the top of my
March 28th or 29th.
March 28th, I believe it is.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, first of all, let folks know that, Chip's book is available for pre-order. There'll be a book signing, but we're also going to hear from you on the big stage. So Chip, my question to you is what can folks expect from a Chip Conley stage talk?
Well, because so many of the people who come to the conference are so much more experienced than I am. I will be very humble on stage, that's for sure. But I think I'll probably dive deep into this idea that midlife is the bridge to, later life, and why it's an important bridge, and why the pro-aging message should not just be for the 65 plus crowd, or for, in residential communities, the 55 plus crowd, but it should be for everybody. Because quite frankly, if we wait till we're 65 or 70 or 75 to have a pro-aging perspective, and to try to influence, Washington and policymakers, then we've really lost the opportunity to have that voice along the way. Because, aging is if we're lucky, is one of the few kinds of demographics that a biased demographic, where people who have a bias with ageism, that we all will experience if we live long enough.
Yeah. And we're on a mission to make that process and make longevity more equitable in every way. And I know you share that mission. Yeah. So thank you so much, Chip. Your book, Learning to Love Midlife, comes out January 16th, available for pre-order. Thank you for, stopping by the ASA channels before you go visit with Hoda and, the other morning.
The GMA people.
Yes, the GMA people.
Yeah, the GMA people, my friends at GMA. I don't know any of those people. So
we'll send them my regards.
Okay. Thanks so much. And Leanne, congrats. Very well deserved.
Thank you. Well, we will see you in San Francisco.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.